said she wouldn't be able to make it until 3 o'clock today, in an hour from now. And then Soraya has mono. So,
hey.
She was on top of things, though, and submitted all of her answers to the questions, so that was good.
Oh,
so
yeah,
that would be another 20-minute meeting today.
That okay with me, honestly.
I don't think we've been marked down for having shorter meetings, because we still talk about everything, so.
I know, sometimes there's only so much you can say before you're repeating everything, so.
Yeah. Especially when we have 5 people in our group and all of us come, it's just like, there's usually 2 or 3 that just dominate the whole conversation.
I know you're like, do you want to say anything? Or they're like, no.
Okay. You guys kind of summed it all up. Good job. Okay. Did you get a chance to finish reading the book?
I did. Did you?
Yeah, it was good. I was expecting this to be on Tuesday, so I was reading it this weekend. I started on Friday when I didn't want to do other homework. And then I can't remember who said it. They were like, yeah, we have a whole book to read, so maybe we should move it to, like, Friday. I was like, it's probably better if we do it on Thursday, since it's due on Thursday.
Oh my gosh, that was totally me. I was like, oh wow, I sound like the biggest idiot.
well, no, because you'd think that, I mean, with other classes that I've had Google Hangouts in, it was like, okay, make sure it's done by Saturday, which is, you know, normal. And so when I looked at the date, I was like, oh shoot, this is one of those things that's due by Thursday at midnight. We probably should do that before it's
I
due.
know. I'm so glad you caught that, though. Because if everyone was like, yeah, let's meet on Friday, we'd all get a zeros.
It probably would have worked out really nicely for everyone's schedules if we met on Friday. You know,
I know.
Might not have been the best grading process for the teacher, but...
Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up my stuff again, because it all shut down.
Okay, well, I have the questions over here in the chat box.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Okay. Having completed the book, how has your understanding and perception increased on the process of international policy and law? Have you done the journal yet?
I have. Yeah, they're all the same questions, right?
Okay, I'm pretty sure. I was like, wait a second. I'm pretty sure I already answered that question. Okay,
yeah,
so let's do the journal.
They're the same questions as far as I know, because I did the journal and then I looked at it today and I was like, wait a second. Did I already answer these?
Yeah.
So, hold on, let me read that one more time since I wasn't really listening. Always do make mistakes. Okay, so I think a good example of this is when we learned about the CRC, because they're so focused on the rights of children that they don't focus on how that can be a threat in and of itself. So policymakers make the same mistake by not paying attention to wording. And this was talked about in A Sacred Duty, but it talked about the importance of wording and how it's an influence, and not always necessarily the law will make a difference, but the influence of the specific words.
I agree with that. And I should open up my journal to see exactly what I wrote. All my thoughts nicely written out. I mentioned the CRC too, though. So it's like it's easy to. I don't think I mentioned it in this question, but I talked about how much opposition they face just with laws and policymaking in general. How much opposition and how long of a process it is. Kind of a hassle to try to do anything. So even when you do have a good idea, like protect the family, getting it through that long process before the family's completely gone is a tricky.
Yes, and you know what frustrated me more than anything about, okay, so he went through all this hassle to make a difference for the family, and they didn't even pay attention to the laws that they made. They kept referring back to the previous meeting or whatever, and I'm like, seriously? Is that seriously how it's going to be? Because that scares me. It really does, because anytime that we make a difference, it's just shoved under the rug. It doesn't really matter.
well, one of the things, and I don't know if we're going to talk about this later, but it was like one of the things that was opposition. The opposition he faced came from like his own group of the non-governmental organizations. All of the other red taggers for like the women's caucus, they were all against him. And I don't know, I almost kind of feel like that's what we're facing right now in the church, how there are some church members that are like still for gay marriage and like for Prop 8 and things like that. Like people that should be, you know, supporting the just causes are going in the completely opposite direction and causing opposition. And that was really frustrating for me. I was like, really, come on. You guys are all there for getting attention, but I don't know.
Right.
It kind of bothered me.
Yeah, and we see that in the, what's it called, the ordained women. That's been really popular for like church members wanting the women wanting the priesthood.
Wanting the priesthood, yeah.
And I actually just saw an article today. One of my family members posted it on Facebook, and the leader, or whoever, what's her name? It's like Carrie something. Apparently, people are talking about her getting excommunicated, and I'm like, okay, that is a perfect example of people in our church like going against everything that we've been taught, because it's really easy to go along with the world because their arguments are so sound sometimes. You're kind of like, whoa.
They're so logical that they take religion out of it, and you're like, oh, wow, that does make sense the way that they explain that.
Yeah.
But when you like factor religion back into it, you're like, oh wait, that doesn't quite match that.
I know. It gets really confusing. And so I understand being in those type of situations, like him going to that big meeting in Istanbul. It's like you have to be so logical, but you have to keep your eye on the doctrine because it's really easy to get confused.
Well, I think the next question covers it. What role did you see the Lord playing? I loved reading. I was just smiling through the whole chapter where they're like, we're just going to shorten that to the Kennedy Center, and the fact that he didn't look like a clean-cut Mormon guy from Utah. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can see this like building and building, and people are going to think that you're someone you're completely not. And when you get up there and start defending family, they're going to be like, wait, you're not matching what you're saying.
Oh my gosh, I was dying when that happened because I don't know if I was just reading the first couple chapters super fast, but I didn't catch that part because I thought it was funny how he was like, it was ironic that they wanted to shorten that, but I didn't make the connection between Harvard and...
I didn't know either. I was just like, oh no, the Kennedy Center, that's probably something really important, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah, and so when the women came up to him and were like, you are not who I thought you were, I was like, that is funny. That is so funny.
Well, it just shows how, I mean, he got everywhere he got as far as he did because of the first impression that he gave, which he didn't mean to give. So the fact that he was growing a beard for however many months to be in Fiddler on the Roof, and then to have the name of his place so long to be shortened to the Kennedy Center, everyone's like, oh, he's probably really liberal. Like, we should probably listen to this guy. He's like, family.
Oh, jeez.
I mean,
and
he had everyone's attention.
Yeah. And throughout the whole book, you just saw, like, all of these miracles happening. I just couldn't even believe it. Like, just circumstance after circumstance, everything was falling into place. And I was like, I hope that if, a portion of our class actually goes into advocating for the family, that it happens like that, because we really do need miracles right now in fighting for the family. And I think that's such an inspiration to read that book and just be like, okay, the Lord really does have a hand in it, because he wouldn't have been able to get that far at all.
Well, I talked about this in my journal, too, of even, I think her name was Susan, the one who invited him to do it.
Oh, yes.
I was just like, maybe that was like a prompting that she received, because her part in the story really kind of affected me. I don't know why, but it was just like, maybe she was just involved in something a little bit where his name came up and was like, hey, we should get him involved. And just her reaching out to him, I mean, he would have never done it had she not invited him.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me was like, okay, even one little comment could make a difference and influence. I mean, the entire conference was changed because of her inviting him.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, obviously there were others involved, but I think just the specific story was like, one person can seriously make a huge, huge difference. And another person that I actually really received a lot of inspiration from was his wife, because she was really supporting throughout the whole entire thing. And he was like, okay, I just need to call Melanie. I just need to call Melanie because I'm going crazy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, if my husband were in that type of situation, would I seriously have been that supportive? Probably not.
I know. Well, he's like, what, he left with the sold sign on their house, so his wife is like getting ready to move.
Oh my gosh,
and
no.
I'm going to Istanbul for 2 weeks, and I mean, completely threw off everything that they were working on, and then for her to be so supportive every time he called home, I'm like, oh man, how, like, what was her whole experience on the other side? Because maybe I could be really supportive on the phone, but when I would, like, if I were to find out, oh my gosh, she got another $1,000 extension on the credit card, and another $1,000 and another $1,000, I was like,
wow, I know.
Please be reimbursed for this, because that was a lot of money.
For paper, for dang paper.
I know. I'm like, I wonder if this is because it's in like 96 that maybe now it's like, okay, we'll just email it to you or email it to your association. But
oh, that's true. I never thought of that.
I'm like, why didn't they just email?
I know. And I was actually talking to my husband about this, and he was like, wait, is he not sponsored? I'm like, apparently not.
I know.
$2,000 on copies. Anyway, I know.
Seriously, yeah, when I was reading that, I was like, oh my gosh, $1,000 for copies and $1,000 more dollars. Like, the people at the credit card company were just probably like, oh my gosh, what is this guy doing? Like, blowing all of his money in Istanbul.
Oh, that's so funny. So, Soraya, for this, are we on the second question or the first question? I guess
I'm kind of just giving my overall impression of the book, and it just happens to cover all the questions.
Yeah,
this is seriously. My problem. I go to answer like the first question in the journal, and I have like this really great answer, and I'm like, oh shoot, well I just answered the next 3 questions.
I know, it's so funny.
I get going way too fast.
Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh yeah, that reminds me of this and this. Anyway, so Soraya, for the first question, she says, I felt that international policy and law is rather intimidating. I kept thinking of how we are all interconnected in the world and how there are certain unalienable rights that govern us all. We are all created in the image of God, and there is more goodly power in our government and leaders as they understand this truth. I think she has a really great point, because I didn't realize until this book how interconnected all the nations were just because of these laws. Like, even until he made his statements about the wording of things and how it affects the laws of the nations that are influenced by it, I guess. I was like, holy cow, each of the nations is following exactly what's going on at these conferences, and some of these people don't even know that they're making that big of a difference.
Or so many of the countries are just like, yeah, we signed it, but we don't ever follow anything that's going on here because they don't understand. And I'm just like, no, because when you sign on to these things, like, you're held accountable for them. That's bad.
I know. I'm like, okay, and just because you don't understand doesn't mean that we don't understand, and we're going to be affected by it.
Yeah, when we have to deal with your country, it's going to be a huge problem when we see that, hey, you signed this and you're not living up to it.
Right.
Like, that's how wars get started.
Yeah, we don't want that. Please understand what you're saying. For the second question, she said, you can see in this book that the Lord is with Professor Wilkins and is encouraging him in his efforts to advocate the families of the world. It is clear that the Lord wants him to stand and to speak out, and also that the Lord will help each of us as we stand for the things that we know to be true. So that's kind of similar to what we were talking about, but the Lord really will bless us for our small efforts, even if they seem I don't know, like they won't make a difference because he wasn't even prepared for this. I mean, he studied this topic for 4 weeks, he was talking about, and like, okay, I would feel so intimidated because all of these people have jobs doing these types of things, and he just is like, okay, let's go make a difference. And anyway, that would just be really intimidating.
Yeah, it was, I know, the fact that he only had 4 weeks, and I'm glad that he made that point, because there's sometimes where, I mean, even in classes, sometimes they're like, okay, you have to do a research paper on this, and it's due 2 weeks from now, and I feel like I have never learned anything on this topic before, and now you want me to give you a 5-page research paper with 8 sources.
I know. And like, where do I even start?
And, like, I don't know, it was reassuring to be like, okay, if you have the Lord on your side, like, things are going to come together, and your life, according to the world, may feel like it's, like, falling apart. I mean, the fact that he spent so much money, that he lost so much weight, so much sleep, like, time away from his family, that this wasn't in his career path, like, all of these things, according to the world, were bad and time wasters, but he was still able to do it because it was what the Lord wanted to happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and something else that I noticed too, well, I'm sure everyone noticed because it was kind of a big part of the book, but it talked about how the definition of the family wasn't written out as like mother, father, children since 1949, and they got it in there. I was like, how in the world did you do that? Like, how in the world did that even happen?
That was amazing. I was like, wait, there's a definition of family somewhere. Go get that.
I know. Tell me about it. I want to read it.
That, and I think even the little changes that they were able to make in the policies had a huge effect. I mean, like, what was it? The little words or phrases that they put, and the definition, like, where they just put in, like, and the family for one of it, for one of the little things. I was like, oh my gosh, that totally changes the entire sentence with one simple addition of and the family, or as mothers and fathers, or something.
Yeah. Oh man, that was seriously such a cool book.
Yeah, it really was. I read it on the Kindle, but it's this semester I switched over because I bought my books on my husband's Amazon account, so I had to switch my Kindle to pretend like it's his. So I lost like all of my other books until I go and relog it. So I'm like, I'm gonna miss having this book after the semester's over, because I'm gonna go back to my Kindle where all of my books are.
Right, I know.
But it was. I seriously would like recommend this book too. I feel like I don't know, I feel like I could have read this in other classes and it would have been just as effective.
Oh, yeah.
But maybe family advocacy classes are probably the most influenced by this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Third question? Is that what we're on now?
Yes.
Okay, so even though the book was largely about Richard Wilkins' experience, what important supporting roles did you see others playing in this account? Okay, we kind of talked about this with Susan and his wife especially.
All the women.
all of the women helping this man.
But not the women's caucus, because they were terrible.
Yeah. Let's see, what did Soraya say? I'm really glad that we didn't wait for Stephanie to start this, because it's been really bad.
Oh, yeah, it's already 4:30. Dang, it's already been 20 minutes.
Yeah, I know. Okay. Soraya says, you can tell how his efforts affected many others. A common phrase to use here is, my small and simple things are great things brought to pass. It is important to recognize this so we can apply it to our own lives. The small decisions and advocacy moments we make can really impact other people and join people together in a good cause. I liked how, I don't even know which leader or someone from another country was like, where have you been?
Oh, yes. That almost made me cry.
I know.
I was like, oh my gosh, thank you for going.
I know. Well, it just makes me think, like, I don't know, there's some times where I think, you know, I see an accident on the freeway, oh, I should call to report that so someone knows. But it's like, oh, there's probably 10 other people already doing it, so I'm not going to do it. And I think it's like one of those cases of, oh, the family's being attacked and torn apart. I should probably do something about that. But I'm not qualified. I don't know anything about it. I'm not going to get involved in that accident. Someone else is probably already in charge. And
Right.
so when someone does stand up and do something like that, you're like, yes, I come out and I fully support you, because I was too afraid to stand up and do it myself.
I know, and I can't believe. I mean, I know I keep saying this, but just one person, because even the, was it the Arabs that he had been talking to the whole time that became his really good friends?
Yeah.
And they were there. They supported the family, but he was the one that initiated the whole pro-family. I don't know. He just made such a big difference, and then they were able to follow and make a big difference as well. So getting yourself out there, like, you never know who you're going to inspire.
Well, and the other thing is that I kept thinking of is, like, wow, Satan really works so hard. I mean, even with, like, all the women's caucus members, like, everyone that should have been there and on his side, it still seemed like he was facing so much opposition, even from his own people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Satan makes us feel like that all the time. Like, oh, you think you're going to be able to defend the family? Well, guess what? Here's all of this media saying all of these different types of family styles are okay, and everyone's happy and not confused, and everyone benefits from living their alternative family lifestyles. And I don't know, he's really tricky like that, and no one wants to speak out because they're like, oh, I don't want to rock the boat. Like, people do seem to be happy when they're living this way, and once someone does speak up, everyone's like, oh, okay. Yeah, like the, what's her face with the video showing at the restaurant. I'm like, hey, that's probably not okay. You should probably do something about that. And then there were other people that were like, yeah, I didn't want to say anything.
Oh,
but
yes. Okay.
It's true. And that was just like, oh, Satan, he's so sneaky. He makes you feel like, I mean, he really did a good job in making him feel like he was completely alone.
Yeah.
And, I mean, one thing after another, I mean, when they added all of the, I think they were like all the women's caucus members that were surprise speakers and take up all the time.
That was ridiculous.
I was just like, how much longer is this going to go on? That,
right.
Like, no one says anything or does anything about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, I mean, even the person who was like one of the, not judges, but he was just overseeing the whole audition or whatever, he was like, wait, what about these other people who have like different views? And I was like, oh my gosh, that would have taken so much courage to say that. Especially, wait, how did he phrase it? He was like, oh, I can't remember. Anyway, it was just really funny how he said it, but
yeah,
I forgot my point. I have so many thoughts.
It's easy to stay quiet and just be like, okay, fine, we'll just let the other side take over. Like, we'll just wait our turn nicely. But there are some times where, I mean, he had to stand up and like, hey, are we gonna do this or what? Like, I'm here.
Yeah.
And you told me I would have a chance to talk, and so they gave him like what, 6 minutes? He only used 4, and I was like, yeah.
I know. Yeah, and I love that he was always relating it back to the prophets in the Book of Mormon. I was like, okay, well, the scriptures, I guess I should say, because he related himself to Jonah too, which I thought was funny.
Yeah. I'm going to Nineveh.
I know. I was like, that's seriously true, because sometimes I find that it's hard to relate to the stories in the Book of Mormon, but he did that so perfectly with contemporary issues. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
You have to know your scriptures for that, for sure, but...
I mean, yeah, he was really into the scriptures to know, like, hey, this is... Jonah totally avoided going. Yeah. And look what happened to him. So if he just went, that was... And I was wondering how long it was going to take him to remember that his wife had given him a copy of a family proclamation.
Oh, like, me too.
Come on, your wife gave it to you like the day before you left. Why haven't you got it out yet?
I know, and he's like, I didn't know where to go. I'm like, hello, family proclamation. And so I called my wife, hello, she's going to tell you the family proclamation, and she did.
What did I give you?
It's funny.
Oh, yeah, that was good. Okay, other insightful lessons. I feel like it was really just like all these small things that added up, but when you have the Lord on your side, it can make an impact, even if it was just to the people there or to help strengthen his testimony, because they talked about like the next year they kind of just ignored the last conference and went back to the years before. But I don't know. I didn't realize that things like this were happening right when the Family Proclamation came out. And
because oh, sorry, go.
Oh, I was going to say, I kind of always thought that it was like, oh, the church put out the Family Proclamation, and then 10 years later, the family's under attack.
Right.
And it's a good thing we were so prepared. But there's all this stuff going on in the background. I mean, you never hear anything about what's going on in the UN, ever.
No, never,
Until
ever.
10 years down the road when you're like, oh, yeah, the CRC is now in effect, and children don't have to tell their parents anything. And you're like, whoa, what? No.
I know. When did this happen? Why are we not informed about this?
Yeah, and so I don't know, I really thought it was, I don't know, a good connection to make that, like, within a year of the Family Proclamation being read, that this whole thing happened. And I think it just shows what the leaders of the church, they're really in tune with things that are even going on in the UN that no one else knows about.
Yeah, and I can't
they have
even,
to be on top of.
Yes, I can't even imagine, like, trying to just be an influence in the United States where things are so crazy, but you have to be so involved in every other type of nation's policies in order to make a difference through the world and not just the United States.
Yeah.
And I'm like, seriously, it was the perfect timing. And I was like you, I thought it was, they gave the proclamation and then 10 years later, like, oh, good thing that was out.
Yeah.
No, it was like immediately taken into effect, and it had to be in order to make a difference in that meeting. But I also liked what you said too, is sometimes it doesn't make as big of a difference as we want it to, and sometimes it's just to strengthen your own testimony. And one of the ways that he found to make a bigger difference than what it did through the meeting in Istanbul is that he wrote a book about it. We never would have known about any of this stuff if he didn't write a book. And so it strengthened his testimony enough to be able to be like, okay, this is a big enough issue that I have to get it out there.
Even for church members that are like, oh yeah, Family Proclamation. I mean, I feel like sometimes being a marriage and family major, I'm like, okay, this is being like rammed down my throat. I should probably have it memorized by now for how much I have to read it, but I don't. But even church members where I'll be in Relief Society and someone will, like, the lesson will quote Family Proclamation, and I'll know immediately what it's from, but other people are like, oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh my gosh, I know.
And I'm just like, ugh. Go back to school. Every single class of BYU Idaho references the Family Proclamation every day.
I know. Well, and so I just barely switched my majors 2 semesters ago, so my minor is in marriage and family, and I, like, the only time I would ever really read it or discuss it was in church, and that's once a week, and so it's not that big of a deal, and I'm like, okay, I understand that things are happening in the world, blah, 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 but then I take these classes, and I'm like, okay, this is so incredibly important, and the church does not understand, like, because they're not taking classes on it, and they're not studying it as closely as we are, not to say that they don't have a testimony of it, but they just don't see how it affects the policies also.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
okay. What's the Bronfenbrenner's thing that we studied? So we studied it in this class, but in my other class, it's from the textbook that we have from my other class. So I'd already studied that model of the microsystem, mesosystem, and macrosystem earlier in the semester, and I was like, seriously, if you have that smallest system that's off, you're going to mess up everything. I mean, all of the other systems are going to be messed up because your family system is off.
Yes.
And you're not going to be able to fix the outer systems until you fix that's like if you have bad eggs, your entire cake is going to be bad.
Right.
It doesn't matter how great your flour and your sugar selections are.
It's going to be terrible.
Yeah.
I know. I think it's so interesting too because the whole what's it called? Individualism that's going on right now. It's like, okay, you need to focus on you. You need to focus on what's going to get you farthest in happiness and whatever else they want, like career and money and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And it's like they expect those policies to just affect the individual, but individuals make a society, so how would it not affect society? It just doesn't make sense to me how their thought process is. It's like, okay, the individual is part of society, so you can't just make a law that affects only the individual.
Well,
Hello?
yeah, it's like, I mean, there's the quote, no man is an island, but yet you're treating everyone as if they're their own individual person, which is good. We are individuals, but we all have an influence on each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, like, if I have parents that are smokers, that doesn't mean that just because I'm not going to smoke doesn't mean I'm not going to be exposed to it. And I don't know, in the individualistic society that we live in, we're definitely losing sight of the fact that we all influence each other. It's not just everyone for himself.
Yeah, because one of the major points of the same-sex marriage is like, well, how does it affect you? You know, it's like, okay, think about it for just a second. Does my marriage affect you? Maybe not like directly, but it affects society, and society affects you. So yes, it does, because it affects society. And just like you mentioned in the Bronfenbrenner's ecological system, like everything affects everything.
Yeah.
So
there's no avoiding it. And even as like a married couple, a man and a woman that are married, their children are gonna see, why does so and so have no dads? They only have moms. Like, and they're gonna grow up confused. And because parents, same-sex parents, are probably gonna teach their children differently than heterosexual parents, and that's gonna cause a lot of confusion as people continue to grow up and realize, hey, we're in a really messed up place.
I know. Was it in this class that we had to watch the video of the guy, like, teaching the kindergartners about all the different genders? I can't remember if it was in this class or if it was.
I don't think so. Was it this week?
It was. No, I don't think it was this week. I'm also wondering if it was just something I came across online when I was doing research. It was so sad. So he was this guy, he was in kindergarten, well, teaching the kindergartners, and he was like, okay, so gender does not come from, your outside body appearance. It comes from your heart and your brain and how you feel and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, kids are already confused. Are you seriously teaching them this? So it's like, okay, I'm going to look at you and I think you're a girl, but I need to ask you just in case. It's like, it's just so crazy. They didn't say anything.
I mean, it was just like a lecture.
Yeah, it was just a lecture. But I was like, what are you doing? You are seriously ruining these kids. And especially for people who raise kids in, like, same-sex marriages, they're going to teach them that. And so they're going to grow up being confused and teaching other kids, that same thing. And it's like, it's going to affect so many people.
Yeah, and I know I think in the show Modern Family, they kind of go over, like, because there's, like, the gay couple with the daughter, they kind of go over, like, you're not gay just because we are.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if I've ever seen an episode where they're like, you can be with a boy or with a girl, it's whatever you want. Like, they've never addressed that.
Right. And I hope they don't, honestly.
Well, that's the thing, because I think some same-sex couples would address that and say, like, you know what, we decided that we wanted to be together and it didn't matter our gender, and you can decide the same. I think there are some same-sex couples that would handle it that way, and then there's others that would just be like, don't let the world tell you what you can and can't do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some that are on the defense and there's some that are on the offense, and it's going to confuse. I mean, the reason that courts choose which parent is best for a child to live with in a divorce case is because the child doesn't have the capability to make that decision yet. Like,
right. Children's
brains are still developing. So the fact that, like, a kindergarten class teaching kids about different genders is really going to throw things for a loop.
I know.
They can't even understand simple logic yet.
No, and that's the thing is, like, you honestly don't understand a lot about yourself and your body until you're older anyway.
Yeah.
So how would they even know the difference? It's like, it's just crazy to me.
Well, I just think of the glass experiments where there's like the short wide glass and the tall skinny glass, and you show it to a kindergartner. It's like, oh, that one has more because it's taller.
Yes.
Like that's how they see things. That person has short hair, so they're a man.
Yeah.
And like,
I know. So maybe I won't even stick with them, and that would be great. But
yeah.
Anyway, I'll have to find that video again because it seriously disturbed me. I was like, what's going on?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I can't believe I haven't had to watch that in any of my classes yet.
I know, right?
So, this is like my third or fourth semester in this major, and like, no, I've never had to watch that.
I know.
Really interesting. Let's see. Okay, Soraya says for the last question, I love most of all how the proclamation to the world was such an inspiration and influence in this account. I think there are many inspired works and documents that we can learn from, gain a testimony of, and receive further insight about. I admire the bravery of those who stand up for families and for rights as children of God. I hope to be such a person throughout my whole lifetime. Kind of did that.
Yeah.
It'd be so scary. I mean, to be in this career field, to like work for USANF or anything, I feel like it would be like you're going to war every day.
Oh yeah.
Like, just get ready to be at war every day. And I would almost be afraid that would, because work transfers over to family. So if you're a lawyer and fighting all day, it's going to be easier for you to go home and just use your family as the same way. It's like, I'm just going to go and fight with you. I'm just going to be at war with you. And it's super scary to think of going into that with that mentality of you're going to have to fight every day. Or you could go in with the mentality of I'm doing this for the family and fight out of love.
I know.
But I still don't know how I still don't know how that would not influence your family life to be like, hey, I'm fighting for this. We need to be happy right now.
I am so angry with everyone else, but we have to be so happy.
Yeah. I don't know, it's hard. It's something that's scary to even think about going into.
I know. You just have to know your stuff front and back. I mean, you wouldn't even... It's almost like it's just rapid fire of all this information.
Yeah.
And you'd have to be able to pull it out real fast.
Yeah. Well, and he had 10 hours? Or was it 4 hours to write his paper? Write his 10-minute speech that he got his proclamation inspiration from. But, just a lot of pressure. Any other thoughts before we end? I'm pretty impressed with this. It was like 50 minutes long, and it was just the two of us.
I know.
And Soraya's comments.
She's what?
And Soraya's comments.
Oh, I thought you said she's calling. I was like, wait, what? Are you serious?
No, that would be kind of funny.
I know. Well, technically Soraya was here, I guess, but yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we covered everything, though. I think we should be fine.
I think so, too. All right, I don't think we meet next week for a Google Hangouts. At least I don't have anything written down.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't have anything written down either, but we'll see.
Okay. But I think we do the week after. But that's far away.
I know.
All right. Well, this was good, and have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. See ya.
All right. Bye.